Big news day for the Houston Texans. It is S&L. Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you for the special reaction to the final injury report. We start out the morning with a break for the Texans. Evan Ingram not going to play for the Jags. Hasn't been healthy all year. Hasn't played since week 2. A tight end that last year was 4th in the league in receptions. Led all tight ends. Only Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill had more receptions than Evan Ingram last season. He is not going to play. So that was kind of an early break for the Texans. Don't necessarily think that impacts their approach to the game, but pretty decent break for the Texans, given the fact that he was Trevor Lawrence's top target last year.
Yeah, it's one of the only bits of injury news that was going the Texans' way up to that point all week long. And then they got some more injury news that kind of went their way a little bit.
And then you walked out to the practice, and it was inside NRG, and you saw Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon on the field. Joe Mixon looks like he's going to try to go. We haven't seen him since Chicago. Joe Mixon on the field. That's the good news. Also, Nico Collins on the field. I never really suspected that Nico Collins' status was in doubt. I saw a lot of people kind of pushing that. Didn't look at him on the practice field. And I said so on the night stream and think he looked like a guy that wasn't going to go. But Nico and Joe Mixon, looks like both those guys are going to go.
I was worried about Nico because showing up limited with a hamstring on a Thursday is the exact same thing that happened the very last time Dameon Pierce practiced. But Nico was out there. He was a full go. I mean, he was out there running routes in the end zone, doing all sorts of different things that the wide receivers were doing. Nothing that looked like it was bothering him. So maybe a little precaution there with the Thursday injury report. He was good to go. And then Mixon, he's tough as nails, man. So I feel like him practicing at all means that he's going to go. That's my feel on Mixon.
Well, I mean, he wanted to go against Chicago. I mean, he was right back there on the field, and even after he never returned, I mean, he was basically putting on a Lance Armstrong workout on the side, trying to get back in. So yeah, I think Joe Mixon, and I do wonder. With Mixon, I don't mean this as an insult to him, but he did it last year with Cincinnati where he was very reliable despite the fact their season became a lost cause once Joe Burrow got hurt. And this year, I think maybe giving him an extension kind of helps. I think he's still cut from this cloth, don't get me wrong, but I think giving him an extension and giving him that stability means that he's a dog and he's going to try to play no matter what. But I do think that probably elevates it a little bit, especially when you're a running back at 30 and you don't know how much more time you have left in the league.
That's not a bad theory. I mean, does Joe Mixon want to risk his body and risk something popping up and hurting him for a longer amount of time if he's not taken care of, if he doesn't feel like the organization wants him? I mean, we don't have to find out because the organization signed him and he's signed up for the next few years, and he seems pretty happy about that contract. And he seemed pretty happy to be back on the field, and so did the team to have him back out there. And Laremy Tunsil said it was the juice they needed for Joe Mixon being back out there.
Yeah, I missed that question. I really wasn't that interested in that one, but yeah, that one got thrown out there, underhand. But yeah, he is out there. Joe Mixon, no Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce not, and that's no surprise. We kind of knew that Dameon Pierce wasn't going to go this week. So no Dameon Pierce either. Now, here is the interesting news. Jimmie Ward not at practice, and Jimmie Ward's officially been ruled out. So this is interesting because we know what this means. It's not like a speculatory thing where we'll talk about Tank Dell in a second, but this means we're going to see more Kalen Bullock, which a lot of people seem to be begging for anyway. So we'll definitely see more Kalen Bullock. What does it mean? Like, is there a snowball effect with the safeties? We'll have to see. But no Jimmie Ward, no Evan Ingram. You can kind of say this is canceled out. Now, I will say this, though, and I think this is kind of like this is long-term and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. You can talk about how this impacts the actual game. I consider it somewhat of a cancel out, especially with Ingram being out. And now we get a look at Kalen Bullock. But what was the biggest concern about Jimmie Ward heading into the season? Like we know what it was and what's been a concern for Jimmie Ward for a large portion of his career. He's already banged up. So
yep.
you gave him the extension. On one hand, you gave Mixon the extension. Mixon's out there. Jimmie Ward, a little bit concerned about the age and everything. And Jimmie Ward already banged up, and we're 4 games into the season. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's been in the league for over a decade. So it's inevitable that happens, but it's already happening. The biggest concern kind of appearing for Jimmie Ward.
Yeah, this was one of the times where we don't predict injuries, but if a guy has a lengthy enough injury history, we talk about how it is essential that he stays durable, and Jimmie Ward hasn't in a Texans uniform, and he's set to miss his first game, and we'll see if he's back for the Buffalo affair next week. But this means more Kalen Bullock, it means more Eric Murray, and it means more MJ Stewart in the safety role and not in the special teams role that he primarily plays for this team. I mean, they already played Bullock a lot last week, played him more than he had the previous couple of weeks, but this means more Eric Murray, and I will be interested to see, because Bullock was not in there to replace Ward. Bullock was in there to replace Murray. And so they had Murray and Bullock do the same thing. They kind of step back, they play center field, make everybody else right. Who's doing Jimmy's job now is my big question with the safeties. Is that Eric Murray? Do they trust Bullock to do that? Would they let Petrie do Jimmy's job and then have somebody else do Petrie's job? Like there's a couple of moving parts here when it comes to this defense and how they play defense that I am interested to see how they approach Jacksonville on Sunday.
See, I don't look at Jalen Petrie's position as a position that is just kind of this guy replaces what Jalen does. I look at Petrie's role and Petrie's position, and it is S&L, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Be sure to subscribe, 4 o'clock every Friday, 9 o'clock Tuesday through Thursday, and then Mondays, 8 o'clock, 8 to 10 for Reaction Monday, and subscribe to each of our channels individually. But I don't look at that. I don't look at that as like a position. I look at that as an adjustment to a skill set and putting a player in a prime position. So if Petrie does go back, and let's say that they need him back to play more traditional safety, I almost think that means that we see Hewitt or Hansen or someone like that, and we see traditional 3 linebackers. I don't think they try to say, hey, MJ Stewart, go do what Jalen does. I don't think that it works that way. I think this is an adjustment to what Jalen Petrie can do, not necessarily like a position that they just set in stone.
Yeah, the only person that plays Jalen Petrie's position is Jalen Petrie.
Correct.
So, I mean, even if you wanted to bring Desmond King up from the practice squad, he doesn't do the same thing. It's very different. Miles Bryant can't do what Jalen Petrie does. So I'm with you. It'd be a linebacker, or it would be your traditional nickel cornerback, not playing the way that Jalen Petrie plays, which is sort of linebacker, sort of cornerback. Will Anderson said he has a condo with the defensive line. You know, I'd like that comment for a couple of weeks ago. But Bryant or King or Stewart, like they can't bring the run support that Petrie does from that position. So I don't anticipate them putting Petrie back there. I feel like it's easier to find somebody to replace Jimmie Ward than it is to play without Jalen Petrie's position.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and this is kind of nerdy, but I mean, if you're here, you're probably pretty nerdy about the Texans, or you're just trying to get the scoop of what's going on with them. I do wonder like what the active roster looks like, because do you proactively try to bring in a nickel guy? Because Jalen, if your goal is to keep Jalen away from traditional safety, and you want him in that role, by default, he's up closer to being a traditional safety. So does that mean, like you just said, that we see Desmond King active, or we see something like that? I think that's like another element of it, and we're getting in the sticks. But I do think that is something to look for.
I don't think we're getting in the sticks. This is how they play defense. They play defense with. I mean, Petrie's played nearly 100% of the snaps. So if he doesn't play his normal position and he plays Jimmie Ward's position, then they have to change the way they play defense for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I don't anticipate them doing. Again, I think you'd have somebody as a backup just in case whatever you're putting on the field's not working and you do need Petrie back there. So maybe it is Desmond King, but the less changes to if you move Petrie to Jimmy's spot, then you're changing the whole front seven and how they operate. if you just put somebody else in Jimmy's spot, the front seven stays the same and somebody plays Jimmy's job.
Yeah. And it's going to be wild to see. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And I mean, let's just be serious. There's some things, sometimes you look at injuries and it's like, damn, that's a tough break, man. Oh man, this guy got hurt, man. That sucks. But I mean, we're talking about two guys that were hurt last year. So, it's one of those things where Tank Dell got hurt last season. Some were criticizing D'Amico and Bobby for having him blocking by the goal line. And then he got hurt this season in a late in a game. So it's 2 years with Tank Dell and you're having to figure out what to do without Tank Dell, and the same thing with Jimmie Ward. So it's just kind of one of those things. I don't know that you can consider this just bad luck and injuries piling up. This is just kind of more of the same with what we've seen from those two guys, and we'll see how serious it is.
Yeah, Mixon was bad luck. He got hip drop tackled, hurt his ankle, and he missed the game. Like, that was bad luck. That's one of the most durable running backs in football over the past 5 seasons. Tank Dell getting hurt. I mean, he gets hurt. I mean, he missed time before the leg broke. I mean, it was a concussion, but he missed time. But he missed time before he broke his leg. And then Jimmie Ward, in and out of the lineup last year throughout the course of the season. And then, I mean, even when Dameon Pierce gets hurt, Dameon Pierce misses a lot of time. His rookie year, he got hurt. He was done for the year. I know he maybe could have played, but I don't know that he'd have been effective. It's like, even when Pierce gets hurt, he misses a lot of time. And so we're not going to see him this weekend, despite what people might have reported. So I am interested to see, because if they keep things from an offensive standpoint, like we talked about replacing Jimmie.
So we're going to offense now, from defense to offense.
Yeah. So as we're talking about Tank being gone here, like, is that simply somebody has Tank snaps, or do you want to give Stefon Diggs a couple of more opportunities outside and have somebody else do the inside stuff? Like, there's a lot there. That's more of a more fun. You try to match up with us, Jacksonville. Like, figuring out Jimmie, that's like making sure the floor is solid for the defense. Bobby Slowick can have a little bit more fun playing around with, hey, Tank's out. Maybe Diggs is outside. Maybe Diggs is inside. Maybe we're using Xavier Hutchinson. Maybe we're using Robert Woods. Like, there's a little bit more mixing and matching in a positive manner for Bobby Slowick on the offense with Tank out. Like, you got to figure out how to. I mean, he's the third most targeted guy on the team, so go find a way to replace him.
Yeah, there's a number of ways that can go. I almost think I don't want to say it's less crucial, but I think the Mixon factor kind of changes things a little bit, because you're going to be able to run the ball a little bit. And even if you aren't, I don't think you abandon it with Joe Mixon. I think you might be reluctant to stay true to the run game, like in a 14, 17, 20-point game or whatever, when you have Dare Ogunbowale and Akers and Taylor at running back. But I don't think the run game gets abandoned with Joe Mixon. Furthermore, I think Joe Mixon makes the offensive line look better. So I think naturally that makes replacing what Tank Dell can do a little bit easier. We still haven't seen, though, what Mixon is capable of doing. He was moving around pretty damn well out there, but let's just pretend that you have to replace the passing production. There's a lot of comments about John Mechie. I actually think Xavier Hutchinson's kind of the guy to look to. And I equate Xavier Hutchinson. And I don't say what you want about Noah Brown, but Noah Brown last year stepped up to where you won a couple of games because of Noah Brown. Regardless of whether it was consistent or not, you won a couple of games because Noah Brown stepped his game up. I look at Xavier Hutchinson as a guy who in the next few years could develop into a guy that could produce like Noah Brown at a similar level. And hopefully he stays more healthy. So everyone's looking at John Mechie. I'm looking more so at Xavier Hutchinson, and I'm even looking at Dalton Schultz. So like when we talk about Tank Dell, I think there's a natural instinct to look at the wide receivers, and John Mechie, he's WR, he can go. I think you look at Schultz, I think you look at Mixon, and then I just think Xavier Hutchinson, he's been active for a reason. I think he's the guy you look to.
Well, they had that big play last week with Hutchinson. They got called back from one of the illegal formations. We've seen him make some plays. We saw him make some plays in the preseason in both training camp practices and preseason games. there's a little something there, and that's an outside guy. He can sneak down inside, but that's an outside guy. Tank missing is an outside guy missing, and so I know that Tank spent some time inside, but if it's a 1-for-1 replacement, I feel like Hutchinson gets those opportunities first. And man, I tend to agree with you that long term, you're looking at next year or the year after that for Xavier Hutchinson. If he's a real reliable fourth wide receiver for you, absolutely, I can see that happen.
Yeah, and I mean you're looking at a couple of games and stepping up when called upon, and you got a lot of time to develop with Hutchinson. I think Hutchinson would be the guy, and he seems relatively confident in it. I actually talked to him in the locker room today. We'll get into that.
So what you're saying
in the night stream.
This is the Xavier Hutchinson game.
No, I'm not saying that.
That's what you're saying.
No.
The Xavier Hutchinson game.
That is a misquote. That never happened. Dump that. We are having technical difficulties. Cody Stoots has gone AI on us. That did not happen. Did not happen. Although, what does it take for an Xavier Hutchinson game? Like, is it like a 60-yard performance or something? Like, because I think it's all proportional. Like if MJ Stewart comes out and has an interception, that's an MJ Stewart game. There's a little bit higher bar. Like, what is an Xavier Hutchinson game? Like, he's not going to go off like Noah Brown did last year. I think we can agree with that. That's a high bar for what Noah Brown did in those couple of games. It was all pro caliber stuff.
I would tell you that an Xavier Hutchinson game is probably like 83
a touchdown,
83 yards and a touchdown.
What are the odds for a Hutchinson touchdown?
It's a great question.
If it's above 15-1, I'll bet. If it's above 15-1, I'll put a 10 spot on it.
If it's
above 15-1, I'll put a 10 spot on it. That's all I'm saying. That ain't no Xavier Hutchinson game, though. Or is it? Who knows? But I am intrigued to see what the offense looks like. I also think it would be an interesting development. Like, let's say Mixon goes out there and has like a hundo plus. All of a sudden, man, if you're listing like the most important players on the Texans, like Joe Mixon, and he might already be, he's pretty heffing high up on the list. You're pretty dependent on Joe Mixon.
If he comes out and they automatically just look like they're, running through people from a rushing attack standpoint. And this is, when Chicago slows them down, that's a good rush defense. Jacksonville is not good at anything right now. Mixon comes out there and he starts putting together some Indianapolis-esque performance. Like, you're going to be really
150. Yeah, he goes for a football field and a half. I would say that's pretty impressive.
Not a replication, but just he starts rattling off a couple of those big runs. 6-7 yards. I mean, my God, they had a 9-yard carry last week, and that was about it. That was probably the extent of their rushing last week. So, if Mixon could go out there and get you 5-6 a pop a couple of times a drive, you're feeling pretty good about the situation.
Raphael swarming the super chat.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
If the O-line looks bad again, O-line coaching change. I think you guys mentioned before that you had concerns about our O-line coach. I don't have concerns about the O-line coach. I'm tired of talking about O-line coaches. That's more so me. Cody's the one that loves Chris Strausser so much. Any O-line coach, this guy right here. He loves O-line coaches. This guy.
That's not true.
They're not going to change an O-line coach mid-season. No.
Yeah, but I would look in the offseason. I would tell you that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how they bounce back.
Unless look, that's one thing that when I let my mind wander that perhaps Nico Collins was going to miss the game. I thought, okay, how do you fix that? I was like, okay, well, maybe Diggs has like a superstar day, or somebody steps up if Nico's not in the game. And then how I thought about it, I was like, the way you would play a game without Nico Collins is you'd hope the 5 guys figured it out on the offensive line and you just beat the other team up, and you'd figure it out that way. Like if they bounce back on the offensive line this week, like the confidence level for this team goes way higher than it was that 24 hours after Minnesota.
Shout out to Raphael. He kind of says he's not in for O-line coaching discussions. Well, you and Cody can't hang out. He says, but this O-line looks worse than last year. Does it? Like, doesn't it look kind of similar?
Well, They allowed they let CJ Stroud get crushed for 2 games, and then they didn't allow a sack in the 3rd game or something like that.
Yeah. I get, I mean, maybe it does look worse. Maybe you're right.
They were rotating guys in and out last year. Like it was, remember they played like 5 different offensive lines.
I thought it was more than that.
Like, well, I'm talking about like 5 different offensive lines in the first 6 weeks.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So here it is. Stroud got sacked 11 times in the first 2 weeks, and then he did not get sacked again until New Orleans.
Yeah. They picked it up a little bit. Dell was a big part of that.
But then they didn't have a clean sheet the rest of the year.
Yeah, they did not. So we'll see. But on defense, it's going to be really interesting. And then on offense, what is your biggest source of optimism, and what's your biggest source of pessimism for the Texans heading into this matchup against the Jags?
My optimism is I don't believe the Jaguars can stop them. So I feel like there's going to be, even if the O-line's just average, like they were bad last week. If they get to average, it should be a really nice offensive day for the Texans. Nico Collins, if they try to play their typical style of defense against the Texans, it's going to be a huge day for Nico Collins. It's going to be a huge day for Stefon Diggs. The Jaguars probably had to drastically change how they want to approach things. They're missing cornerbacks. They're missing their top tackler. Like, it is a rough situation for Jacksonville. Oh, by the way, they stink. They're 0-3. Their pass rush is not consistent since
they could use Aiden Hutchinson.
Exactly. Since Josh Allen has changed his name, he's not as good.
It's like that's what happens in the AFC South. Did he not learn from Darius to Shaq Leonard? Did you not learn that once you're one of the more dominant defensive players in the division and you change your name, you just completely fall off? I don't think he knew his recent history of AFC South guys. Josh Allen.
Yeah, it's a bad job by him. He's got 1 sack in 3 games, and that's about it. Like a couple of he hit Deshaun Watson 4 times. He hadn't touched another quarterback in 3 games. Do you think?
And we're getting in kind of like Jacksonville territory. Shout out to Dime. He says Mixon's going to have a hundo. He says Hutchinson 50+ and Diggs with 2 tutties. Appreciate you, my friend. That. Do you think that Travon Walker gets his 5th-year option picked up?
No, that'd be so dumb if they did that.
I mean, I'm just asking. I mean, he was the number 1 pick in the draft, dude. He went over Aiden Hutchinson, Derek Stingley.
At least he's touched a quarterback that's not it's not Deshaun Watson. He's doing better than a huge contract for. I mean, they spent $150 million on Josh Allen, and he changed his name. He's not any good.
Look at the 3 guys that went right after him.
After Travon Walker,
Hutchinson, Stingley, Sauce.
I mean, they'd love to have any of those guys. Who else went right out? I mean, like, you could make an argument he's probably he's probably like the 20th best player in that draft in the first round.
Yeah, it's wild. He's had some interesting moments against the Texans. He had that roughing on Davis Mills that led to the dub.
Kayvon Thibodeau's better than him. Drake London's better than him. Garrett Wilson's better than him. Olave, Kyle Hamilton. Like, there's a ton of players better than him out of this draft.
Yeah, not good. Not great for sure. That was
Kenyon Green. No, I'm kidding. Not yet.
Yeah, I would say probably not. So my optimism is this when it comes to the Jags. And I think this is kind of interesting. Like, their goal, if you listen to the players and the coaches and you kind of pick their brain on what Jacksonville wants to do, their goal is to get the ball out of Trevor Lawrence's hands quickly. They want to get the ball out of his hands quickly, which is interesting because if you just look at Trevor Lawrence, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, he can play fast. At Clemson, they played extra fast, but he just kind of resembles a guy who would be able to extend plays. And, he moves around pretty decently. He's got a big arm. But if their goal is to get rid of the ball quickly, I almost think that plays into the favor of the Texans. Now, you are avoiding the pass rush, but the Texans have also been unable to finish. And quite frankly, I don't know how long they can cover receivers. There's a lot of times where receivers could get open a little bit more if you extend plays. So I don't necessarily think that getting the ball out of his hands quickly is something that is like the worst thing for the Texans, especially given the fact that I think their corners are really, really good. So it might be a little bit more difficult to do that.
I will be wagering this weekend that Derek Stingley has an interception, that Kamari Lassiter has an interception. I'll be parlaying them as well. Like Stingley, it feels like Stingley has
Both of
been.
them?
Yeah, why not? Just cover my bases, you know. It feels like the way Stingley breaks on stuff, like we saw it in like a tackling mentality in the first week against Indianapolis. Like he'll recognize and break on stuff. And if you're not an elite receiver, he's going to get you. I feel like he's going to do that. He's going to recognize, break on something, and intercept the ball on one of those quick ones that Lawrence is trying to get rid of the ball.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they guard these receivers. I do think there's going to be a breakout game for Thomas at some point. So I would kind of keep an eye on him a little bit.
That's Brian Thomas, the first rounder that they picked.
Yes, yeah. BTJ. Brian Thomas Jr. So I'm a little bit worried about him. I always have a lot of respect for ETN. I actually like their backup back as well. But I think the Ingram thing, I don't think that they think it's that big of a deal, but I think it's a big deal, man. I think it's a big deal. Not because of what he's done this year, he hasn't done much, but because there was question like, can he get healthy and will he be healthy against the Texans? He's not. So there you go.
I wonder what the mentality is of this Jaguars team coming into this matchup, because if you remember in 2020, the Texans fought really hard in the fourth game of their four losses to start the season. Like they played Minnesota close at the end, and it was close to like a reviewed play at the end of the game, you know, that basically decided the game late. I can't remember the exact details of it, but like they played pretty hard for a guy that was like going to get fired if they lost that game. And then ultimately they lost and Bill O'Brien got fired. They're a wounded animal, but there's still a little juice to them that you would think, right? Or are they the type of organization that comes in here and lays down if they get their head kicked in the first quarter?
I mean, I think it's a big opportunity for them. So I don't know. It hasn't been interesting. The line has dropped. Thought maybe it would drop, but it's dropped down to 5.5.
Okay.
It went from 6.5 to 5.5, which is a big number if you're a betting guy. Like if you can get it below 6 or 3 or 7 or whatever, I think that's big.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, I just wonder if this is a team that, you know, with the injuries piling up, Peterson's on the hot seat. If you punch them in the mouth early enough, they might look around and they might open.
You think they're gonna lay down
a big old can of quit?
Okay, so you think they're gonna be a can of quit with Jacksonville? I don't know. I think it's gonna be
you like the Texans have to make them quit early, but like I believe it's possible. Now, you know, they have a little juice early on. You know, that it's 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. Maybe they stick around, but you know.
The question is, are the Texans capable? Like Buffalo has shown that they're capable. Are the Texans capable of getting a massive lead going? We really haven't seen like the explosion consistently from this offense.
I would tell you yes, because of I would think they're going to be ready to execute on offense better than they did last week.
Okay.
I would tell you, yes, they are capable of it. Okay. I'd be foolish to guarantee that we're going to see it because it's been so inconsistent.
And you got to guarantee nothing. Nothing's guaranteed in this league, man. It's a week-to-week league. It's a week-to-week league, man. On to Jacksonville.
It's a bunch of corny coaches that say that every week.
It's a thing, though. It's a thing. It's one of those things. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But the big news, just to reset, appreciate everyone for coming through. Be sure to subscribe, and right along. No Jimmie Ward on Sunday. Nico Collins will be on the field. You can bet on Joe Mixon being on the field. No Dameon Pierce. No Evan Ingram for the Jags. So there you go. It's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be a fun game. Late night stream tonight at 10:30. Cody's going to be doing his thing as well. Post-game show immediately after on my channel. Cody will have a post-game video as well, and then Reaction Monday at 8 a.m.
You laid it out perfectly, man. We got a lot of fun stuff headed our way this weekend. It's going to be a good game on Sunday.
Be sure to swarm the like button. Be sure to subscribe to all the channels, and always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good, and we'll talk Texans again soon.